And welcome into the 1010XL.com podcast network, also the Florida Gator 1010XL Facebook page. Breaking news this afternoon at the University of Florida, Billy Napier fired as the head football coach of the Florida Gators, coming off a 23-21 victory last night over Mississippi State. We talked about it all week. Would he be fired even with a victory? Well, he obviously was fired earlier today by athletic director Scott Strickland. There's a ton to do. We're glad you're with us. Let me bring in Hayes Carline. You hear him every afternoon on the Frangie Show. And Hayes is always kind enough to join us in situations where there are breaking news like this. And Hayes, your immediate reaction to the firing earlier today of Gator football coach Billy Napier.
Yeah, Hacker, great to be with you, and thank you for doing this. I think it had to be done. I mean, they were a Michael Burrow interception, very improbable play last night from enduring just another agonizing defeat to a team that hadn't won an SEC game in 2 years. So it had to be done. I mean, we talked about it last week on the Frangie Show, in terms of does he need to get to the fifth loss? I kind of felt like he did, but after witnessing that performance, it's just hard to it's hard to have any confidence that they're going to get hot, that they're going to go on any kind of a run. He simply is overmatched to be the Florida coach. He's a great guy. He's done a lot of good things for the program, and he leaves the program in good shape from a talent standpoint, and I think from a accountability culture standpoint. But it's certainly time for Florida to look to upgrade, in particular in what looks like it could be an incredibly deep pool of coaches. And we obviously talked about that. What's your reaction, and where do you think the Gators should immediately turn to?
Yeah, it's not surprising. Like we said, we had heard as early as last Monday. Our colleague Matt Hayes from the USA Today wrote a piece last week that really blew up on social media that he might be gone, win or lose. I still had some optimism, maybe not optimism. I had some questioning as to whether they would actually fire him after a victory. But if you wanted the ideal scenario after a win to fire him, I mean, that was it. The last offensive play Billy Napier called at the University of Florida was a 3rd and 1 where you'd been running the ball very successfully. Quarterback rollout, obviously gets sacked. Luckily, the defensive tackle bailed him out, and he beats Mississippi State, but he gets fired about 12 hours later. I see Frank Frangie. What a busy day for Frank.
Business is picking up over here.
I mean, holy moly. Let's get Frangie in here as well. Frank, I know a busy day for you calling the Jaguars. You're still over in London. You got to worry about getting back, and all of a sudden your alma mater fires Billy Napier just a couple of hours ago. Your reaction to Billy Napier no longer being the head coach at the University of Florida?
Well, you didn't expect to be weighing in from the British Isles, okay? So you got that going for you. I think Hayes, what Hayes just said is kind of what I think too, Hack. I was told, I came to believe, people with whom I visited, that it would probably be after the 5th loss. And I thought that's what everybody believed. I believe when he lost his 5th game, it would be the next day. Having said that, I never expected the fire Billy chants to be the way they were and the boos to cascade down the way they did. I think my guess is that probably forced everybody's hand sooner than everyone thought. Now, look, Matt Hayes, to your point, did a wonderful job in his USA Today story, as Matt typically does. So maybe he had stuff that we didn't have. But my expectation was after the 5th game. But that was ugly yesterday. I'm not even talking about the game, the way it was played out. I'm talking about the booing, the reaction from the fans. Hack. I don't think I ever expected that, even after the game. And fittingly, to your point, a microcosm of his tenure at Florida, made a horrendous decision on 3rd and a yard. And if he hands the ball to Jaden Baugh and he doesn't get it, nobody criticizes him. It was a play that handing the ball to Jaden Baugh was the logical choice. If you get stuffed and they have to punt, okay, he made a logical choice and it didn't work. But doing something that made no sense, he got criticized one last time. So the irony of all this, the irony that they won because Jeff Lebby made a decision just as dumb, is crazy. But to your point, we knew it was happening. Jeremy Foley used to always say, what has to be done eventually should be done immediately. And they made the right move. It was the right decision. I'm glad it happened. I'm glad for Billy, Hack. Not just because, I mean, Billy didn't need it. He's a good guy. Billy's a good dude. Billy did the best he could. He did a lot of good there in terms of rebuilding the locker room, rebuilding the culture. He set the tone for the next guy. Billy's a good man who did a good job on a lot of that stuff. He wasn't a very good football coach, and you need a really good football coach to run the program. So it was time to move on from a guy that wasn't as good enough coach and to go get a new one. So I thought they got it right. I was surprised, but as the game continued to play out in the booth, I mean, I'm hearing the boos in London, all right. So I'm watching the game on TV and hearing them. You had to hunch something was going to happen.
And I think we all knew at the press conferences, like the Wednesday press conference or the Thursday press conference last week was weird. It was almost like he knew at that point. It was almost like a thank you for 4 years. If you go back and look at the body language, and then last night in particular, I think he probably knew last night that today was not going to go well for him. I want to ask both of you guys, Frank, we'll begin with you. We'll spend certainly a lot of time on the future, but quickly with Billy Napier, why didn't it work out? I mean, everybody was really excited to get this young, hot coach from Louisiana. He had SEC ties. He worked with Saban, worked with Dabo Swinney. We all know the story. And I won't call it a disaster, but it was closer to a disaster than it was a success. Why did it not work out for Billy Napier at Florida?
He never figured out offense. He was not a good enough offensive mind to build offense. You could win at Louisiana that way because if you had way better players than whoever Louisiana plays every week, you were going to beat them. And he had better players, and he's a good program builder. He's good at getting players hacked. So he got enough good players to win at Louisiana. At Florida, you have to turn it over. There's a reason Dabo Swinney doesn't call his plays. Urban Meyer never called his plays. Ryan Day, who was a very good play caller, turned it over. Went and hired Chip Kelly, won a natty. Mike Norvell turned it over. I guess he's not a great comparison these days, but you know my point. Kirby Smart, great defensive play caller, turned it over. Billy was not willing to do that. He was not a good play caller. Their offense had fallen behind the times. He was not an instinctive thinker as a play caller, and he stubbornly refused to pass that on. I sent a tweet out today that, heck, if he had hired Cade Bell, now you can name a bunch of guys, but I named Cade because I know Cade. Cade Bell is 32 years old. Narduzzi from Pitt hired him. They are 5-2, barely lost an overtime game to Louisville. He is a really good offensive coordinator. He's a bright mind because Narduzzi gave him the offense. If Billy Napier had hired him or a guy like that, in my opinion, Hack, and had handed over the offense, I'll be in charge of running the program. I'll be in charge of hiring the coaches and recruiting the players and building the facilities and building the culture. But let me hand the offense over to A, somebody else who I don't have to do it so I can do the other stuff, and B, who's better at it than me. I think he would have been there a long time. So in my mind, he was not a good enough sideline coach. He was not a very good play caller, and he stubbornly and arrogantly, as much as I like him, refused to give that up, and that's what I think got him fired.
You know, Hayes, I was always of the opinion that Billy Napier was still living in a world where he tried to impress Nick Saban or tried to impress Dabo Swinney and say, yeah, I can do this. I can call plays. And when he was repeatedly asked by many people within that Florida football program over the last year and a half or two to hire an offensive play caller, and he said, no, I'm the best man for the job. Well, obviously he wasn't. His play calling was bad. I've had analysts on my show use terms like horrific and horrendous to talk about the play calling. Is that what you think the biggest problem for Billy Napier was at Florida?
Yeah, without a doubt. I mean, they rank outside the top 100 in pretty much every major offensive statistical category. I mean, it was just always a disaster. It was always predictable. But having said that, he leaves a pretty good situation for the next guy, in my opinion. You look at the talent that's on the roster. I do think you look at the culture. I don't think there's a lot of bad apples that have to be weeded out. So, I mean, that's why it failed, because he's not a gifted offensive mind. But if they can go get a gifted offensive mind, I think they can have success right away. What do you guys think?
Well, I'll tell you one thing. Oh, excuse me, I can't even jump in. But I'll tell you this. I thought last night was the best case in point of what a great recruiter he is. The whole secondary's hurt other than Bryce Thornton. And Ben Hanks' kid goes and plays. And number 2, whoever the hell that was, goes and plays. And number 6, whoever the hell that was, they're good players. They couldn't even get on the field because he's recruited so many good defensive players. You watched those secondary guys last night. They were good. And I mean, they against Mississippi State.
I thought Mississippi State was getting ready to hang 52 up 5 minutes into the game.
And they never did because those defensive guys. So that shows you, Hacker, what a good recruiter he was. Whoever 2 is, I don't know his name. Whoever 6 is, I don't know his name. I know Ben Hanks' name because I know his dad's name. who all those guys came out of nowhere. 43 made 100 tackles last night.
He looked like Wilbur Marshall.
Yeah, and so
I mean, within reason.
But I mean, the defensive lineman he lost. Look at, I mean, Makai Burrow would have been third team if he hadn't lost Bakes and all these guys.
Yeah.
So he's recruited, to Hayes' point, Hack, he recruited really good players. They developed those players. He built a culture. He was just a lousy offensive coach and game day coach, and that cost him his job.
With Frank Frangie and Hayes Carline, the hacker Ryan Green with you. A little breaking news here on the 1010XL social media platforms and the Florida Gator 1010XL Facebook page. Billy Napier fired earlier this afternoon as coach of the Florida Gators. Quickly, guys, because people want to talk about the future now, and we'll certainly get to that. Hayes brought up the amount of young talent. Frank, let's begin with you. In the land of NIL, in the land of the portal, and Billy brought all these guys in, certainly DJ Lagway and Dallas Wilson and Vernell Brown, Jaden Ball. We all know the names. Great talent if they stick around. If Billy is now gone, one would think probably all of his staff will be gone. Obviously, this is only a couple of hours old, but whoever they hire, and it's going to be a long process, right? If you want Lane Kiffin, guess what? He's not taking this job for 2 months, if 2.5 months. You're probably going to lose some of this young talent to the portal, are you not?
Yeah, yes and no. You'll lose some. But the new rule, and I know you know this, Hack, Hayes and I have talked about this on our program, that now you can't leave until 5 days after your coach is hired. Right. So the new coach gets a crack at him. And the new coach is going to be a high-flying guy making $12 million, okay? So he's going to have reason to recruit you. So I think, and look, you're playing with the University of Florida. So I think there's a chance you have a chance to keep him. Yes, you'll lose some guys. But Hack, to your point, the other part of that story is any transition year now has to have a lot of portal players. I don't think you have to build your team that way. Georgia doesn't need many guys in the portal, right? They have a few here or there. They don't need them. But if Kirby Smart left for the NFL and the new coach came in, he would need portal guys for the reason you just said. So whoever they hire, to your point, whoever they wind up hiring, Hack, he's got to be good at the portal. I've got to believe with Lane Kiffin or whoever, the 26 team, next year's team, has got to have 15, 18 really good players out of the portal. That doesn't mean you have to do that every year, but the first year. So I think you've got 5 years to keep some of those guys. There's a lot of them. You keep those receivers and defensive backs, you're off to a really good start. So, yeah, I think the right guy goes in. Everyone thinks it's going to be Kiffin. I'd love it to be Kiffin. He'd be my first choice. All right, he'd be my first choice because I think he'd be most people's first choice. But if it doesn't wind up being Kiffin, whether it's him or whoever, you got to get a guy that understands the portal, that's good at the portal, that understands how important it is, and that gets in there and can recruit the players you have now. That is critically important because you have a chance to be good right out, to Hayes' point, right out of the gate.
Hayes, what's your opinion on DJ Lagway? I mean, what do you think his future holds? Obviously, we know the relationship he had with Billy Napier. As Frank mentioned, whoever they hire, Kiffin, name your coach, will have about a week's time, 5 days, to try to convince DJ to stay. But do you get the sense that DJ Lagway might look for greener pastures elsewhere now that Billy Napier is gone?
I actually think it depends on who the coach is. To Frank's point, he's got to hear him out for 5 days before he can do anything. So it just makes you wonder who the hire is. Because if it's Lane Kiffin, to me, I don't know that Lane Kiffin is just automatically going to want Lagway. I mean, right. He's got a couple guys that he could bring with him. That's why this hire is so important, to Frank's point about the portal. Retention is going to be huge for Florida here. And with the revenue sharing, it helps. Because they have $20.5 million where they can start throwing money at guys that are already on the roster, which would make a lot of sense. But even beyond that, when you look at it, whoever Florida hires has got to come from a program where that coach can bring 5 to 10 players with him. So with Lagway, it's interesting because I don't know I think Lagway still has the potential to be a great college player. I think he's been he's been in a bad scheme for sure. And definitely, I think the attrition in the offseason hurt his development. So I still think there's something there with Lagway. But I think it's going to be interesting because if it's Drinkwitz, he probably is going to do everything he can to keep Lagway. And I would imagine James Franklin, if it was James Franklin, Marcus Freeman perhaps. But I don't know about Kiffin. So it's interesting. I think with DJ Lagway, it depends on who they hire.
Frank, you're very connected in Gainesville, obviously, and certainly you're over in London, so we got to take that into account. This just happened a couple of hours ago, but let's get into the future now. Lane Kiffin, by an overwhelming majority of Gator fans, is the number one choice. Depending on who you talk to, there are mixed feelings on whether Florida would look that direction, particularly if Scott Strickland would look that direction. Would Lane Kiffin be interested? I think that's maybe more of a yes than if Scott Strickland would actually be interested in him or not. But let's talk about Kiffin first. What do you think the thoughts are in Gainesville about Lane Kiffin?
I think there's a lot of pieces to the story. Number one, my guess is there will be a number of people that make that decision together. Scott will lead the charge. And I like Scott Strickland a lot more than some people do. I think he's a good AD on many fronts, and I'm glad he's there. But I don't know that this is a decision that I would want my AD making by himself, whoever the AD was. I think when you have an interim president, which is a situation in Gainesville now, that other people, I think the board of trustees are really going to be involved in this. Maury Husseini is the chairman of the board of trustees. Maury's not a big sports guy, but my guess is he's going to call on people on his board to be involved in this, more so than an interim president will. I think Scott will be the point guy. I think Scott's a smart guy. And I don't know what Scott thinks about Lane Kiffin. I don't know. You hear this and that. I don't know what Scott thinks about Lane Kiffin. I don't know what the board does. But I can't imagine that he wouldn't be vetted. I think at this point, it can't be a group of 5 guy or a group of 6 guy now, Hack. It can't be an assistant coach. It can't be a guy that's been out of it. It's got to be a very effective sitting head coach in a Power 4 school. That's why I think I don't sense that James Franklin's in play. I don't think the University of Florida, where they are now, can hire a guy that just got fired. I don't think they can do it. I'd be surprised. That's why I think Kiffin's in play and Drinkwitz is in play, and I wouldn't be surprised if Kenny Dillingham is ultimately in play or if Marcus Freeman is in play. I think Kirk Cincinnati would have been in play until he re-upped. So I think it's got to be a guy.
And Brom is really interesting.
And I haven't heard Brom, but how is he not in play? Now, the problem with Dillingham, with Brom, with guys like that is, for what it's worth, they're at their alma maters. And maybe you say,
Brent Key is another one. I would love Brent Key, but that's the same problem there.
Yeah. I don't think you're going to see Brent Key in play, but I think you might see. I think you're going to see Drink in play. I think you're going to see Kiffin in play. I think you would have seen Cignetti. I haven't heard Brom or Dillingham, but I think you have to. But I do think Clark Lee, Dillingham, Brom are all at their alma maters. And you say, well, they'll leave that to go to Florida. Well, you don't know that. I watched Lon Kruger leave his alma mater, Kansas State, to go to Florida because of the opportunity. I've heard other guys say, no, I'm staying at my alma mater. So you never know where those guys are there until you offer. Now, I also think this. I think you're looking at $12 million a year. I think you're looking at probably whoever gets this job will be one of the 3 highest paid coaches in college football. Well, that's enticing too now. Okay, so, but my guess is, Hack, sitting Power 4 coach who's had success, which is why Kiffin is at the front of the class, which is why Cignetti was at the front of the class, which is why I think Drinkwitz will be in play. I've heard those names. Okay, I've heard those names. I would have Brom in play. I might have him right behind Kiffin, to be honest with you. But I haven't heard whether he's in play or not. I haven't heard whether Dillingham. And I'll say this, AD, Scott Strickland among them, often will surprise you. I had no idea who Todd Golden was. When I heard, I can tell you a story. I've told the story on the air. When Mike White left for Georgia, I called Jeremy. I know Scott very well. I know Jeremy very well. I asked Jeremy. I talked to Jeremy Fuller. Jeremy, we talk a lot. Jeremy, what do you think? Jeremy goes, well, Scott's got his guy. He's got the guy he wants to hire. And I said, you're not going to tell me who it is, are you? He said, no, I can't. And nor should he have, by the way. He shouldn't violate Scott's confidence. He said, but he's got his guy. And he's very confident in the guy. And he thinks he's got a pretty good guy. So I knew right then and there that Scott had his guy, and it turned out to be Todd Golden. So Scott, and that was a surprise. So I don't see a surprise here. I don't, Hack. I don't see a surprise. I think this is going to be one of the names we've heard. And I'll say it again. The Kiffin thing is so prominent out there that doesn't mean they have to hire Kiffin. It doesn't mean Kiffin has to take it. But I can't fathom that both sides wouldn't do a great deal of due diligence on this just to see if they love each other. You know, mm-hmm. I mean, I can't imagine with all the talk of Lane Kiffin to Florida, with the fact that his family has ties to Florida, his ex-wife who lives back in Oxford now went to Florida. She's a graduate of Florida. The kids have Florida in their heart. Their grandfather was John Reeves, who was one of the great players in Florida history. I can't imagine that you won't at least see a flirtation between Florida and Lane Kiffin before anything else happens. Whether he lands or out, or hey, do you agree with me on that? I can't imagine that there won't be some flirting between Florida and Lane Kiffin, even if it doesn't wind up being a courtship. Doesn't there have to be, given all the talk?
I'd be stunned. And I mean, frankly, I think this is the easiest Florida coaching search to predict that we've seen since probably Spurrier. And Frank can talk more about that. But obviously, Zook kind of came out of the blue. He certainly wasn't at the forefront of candidates that you heard. Muschamp was not at all. Muschamp came out of the blue. Jim McElwain, the Colorado State coach, no one pointed and said, oh, it's going to be him. And really with Mullen that year, Mullen was like the third or fourth guy that people brought up. And then Napier was a hot name. But again, the Lafayette coach, I mean, it is what it is. So I don't think you've ever seen a candidate that is as outspoken about his affection for a program that, oh, by the way, he didn't even attend the school. Right. But affection for their iconic coach, the program that they've had, a guy that has seen the Swamp up close, both in 2009 and certainly last year. He knows what that environment is like. He knows how it can change games. And I just think it's the place Lane Kiffin has always wanted to be at. That documentary that they released a couple weeks ago, I thought just pretty much let the world know he was open for business. I mean, he pretty much said, I was going to take the Auburn job 2 years ago, and my daughter at the 11th hour talked me out of it. Right. Well, that's not going to be required for this. I mean, if he was going to leave there for Auburn, he is going to leave Ole Miss for Florida with this roster and what he can do there. Lane Kiffin is somebody that wants national titles on his resume before he is done, and he knows he can get them at Florida. And if Florida isn't interested in Lane Kiffin, they should discontinue the program.
Hacker, let me make one more point about Kiffin real quick. And I said this on my air. And Hayes, when Spurrier took the job, you guys were tights, okay? I covered the story. I covered the Spurrier to Florida story throughout the 80s. And I remember in the 80s, there was talk about it in the early 80s. So it's, well, but he's never been a head coach. Okay, so then he coached the Tampa Bay Bandits for 2 years. They were very good. Okay, he's been a head coach. Yeah, but he hasn't been a college head coach. Okay, so then he went to Duke. Well, he's a Duke head coach. Yeah, but he hasn't proven he can win. Well, then he wins the ACC championship in '89. Timing had to be right. The timing had to match up with the job had to come open. Somebody had to get fired. And he had to have accomplished all those goals. And then when the timing was right, it was obvious in 1990 Spurrier was going to be the coach because finally everything fit. I see the same thing with Kiffin. I know Kiffin didn't go there. We've talked about Kiffin to Florida a lot of years. But first of all, he wasn't mature enough. And he had to get his social life in order. Remember, he quit drinking. He had to get his life in order. He had to become more mature. I think he had to prove he could do it at the head coach's level. He's proven that at Ole Miss now. I think all that had to come into play. And when all of that finally came into play, then I thought it started to make sense. So I think if they want Kiffin, and if Kiffin wants the job, Hack, I think finally the timing is now right. They moved on from their coach. He's done about what he can do at Ole Miss. It's been 6 years. He's going to wind up at the next school, whether it's Auburn, LSU, Alabama, Florida, wherever. Lane Kiffin, we all know he's going to wind up at the next school. The timing is right now for him to get to Florida. Timing has to matter, and I think it's right now.
Guys, as we begin to wrap up, I want to get some final thoughts from both of you. But one more topic on Lane Kiffin. There's going to be a ton of pressure on Florida from the fan base to hire Lane Kiffin. I think we just spent 15 minutes on it. Lane Kiffin is the guy that Florida wants. And certainly I believe they will contact him. If for whatever reason it doesn't work out, either Kiffin says thanks but no thanks, or Florida, for whatever reason, finds a better candidate, which I can't imagine, but just stay with me here. I mean, how much of a gut punch to this fan base would it be if it is not ultimately Lane Kiffin?
Well, that is a great question, Hacker. It is that you have hit the nail on the head with this. There is so much love for Kiffin. There's so much craving of Kiffin to be the coach and attention that what if it's not him? Does the air come out of the sails? That's not fair to Eli Drinkwitz, who might be pretty good, or Kenny Dillingham, who might be pretty good, or Jeff Brom, who I know would be pretty good. Can people get excited? Now that thing happens pretty quick. The first time one of those guys does a press conference and wins the press conference, you get excited pretty quickly. But you're right. There's so much attention on the Kiffin pursuit in the fan base. Again, we don't know what the school thinks, but there's so much attention on Kiffin in the fan base that if it winds up being anybody else, does the wind come out of their sails a little bit? Hayes, I think you can overcome that pretty quickly. But for the moment, yeah, I think there'd be. I think Hacker's question's a good one. I think there'd be some of that.
I agree. I think this search is. I think the pool is so deep that this hire, even if it's not Lane Kiffin, will be the most accomplished head coaching hire they've made since Urban Meyer. So I think that will help. That even if it isn't Kiffin, if it is a Drinkwitz, a Braum, one of these other guys, Freeman, they're going to come in with a much stronger resume than Muschamp, McElwain, Napier, and probably Mullen, although maybe it'll be a little close with Mullen. Drinkwitz and Mullen have probably had comparable success at two graveyards, in my opinion, in the SEC. But I think in looking at it, it's one of those things that if it isn't Kiffin, it will certainly be a gut punch. But I do think that I don't see this search unraveling. This isn't going to be Alex Golish. This isn't going to be Summerall at Tulane. I think it's going to be Kiffin. To be honest, and Frank did a great job talking about the timing. I think the only thing that derails Kiffin to Florida is if Ole Miss makes the national semifinal, because now he's playing a game January 8th or 9th. The portal has already been open for 5 days, and that's something that I think you have to kind of keep an eye on is, can Ole Miss make it all the way to the Final Four? I don't believe they can. If they make the playoff, they're playing December 19th, December 20th if they make it and lose the first game. That's absolutely no problem at all. That gives you all the time in the world that you need. So this narrative of, Florida can have Ole Miss make the playoff. They just can't get hot in the playoff. Even if they won the first game, got to the second round, okay, that's New Year's Eve, New Year's Day. So, that's right as the portal is going to open. So it's not ideal, but a coach like Lane Kiffin with all of his experience could get up to speed very quick. And again, this is not a roster where I think they need 50 guys. If they can retain 85% of this roster, then they can be selective, 10 guys, and they could really be on their way to some success right out of the gate in year one.
Certainly a crazy day, no doubt about that. Let's wrap it up with some final thoughts. Again, Frank, thank you for joining us over in Europe, for crying out loud, after calling the Jaguar game much, much earlier today against the LA Rams. Billy Napier out. We'll see what the future holds. But for the Gator fans watching and listening tonight, your final thoughts on what was a big day down in Gainesville.
Yeah, I thought it had to happen. It was the right move. Whether people believe it happened too late or not, it's inconsequential now. It's happened. You can't talk about yesterday. What happens tomorrow is all that matters. I thought it needed to happen. I thought Billy Gonzalez is the right guy. Hayes, I told Hayes for months now, but that's the guy. He's been there 3 stints. He's been there over 10 years. If you add them all up, he understands the Gators. He understands the importance. He's a good recruiter. I think he'll connect. I think he's the right interim coach. I believe that. I think they need to get to work. I'm not surprised. I think it's the right time. It's going to be a rough end of the season because you play a bunch of good teams with an interim coach. That never goes very well. So it's going to be hard. You can't get too caught up in this season. I do believe this. I do believe the best thing they could do is be very aggressive. I believe if Kiffin's their guy, if Drink's their guy, whoever's their guy, I would aggressively ask to talk to them. I would aggressively get to the agent. I'd go to the AD and ask permission. I would not waste much time in this. But I think it was the right time, Hack. Again, I thought it would be the 5th loss. I will tell you this. Even after the game last night, I said this and I tweeted this. I think he's going to get the Georgia game. But I'm not surprised he didn't. The way the boos came down, the fire Billy's too good a person to have to go through that. And it's his fault. But I think Scott Strickland did everybody, Billy Napier included, a favor by moving on. I thought they got it right.
I think that's a great point. I think Billy Napier, he got fired. He also is going to have $21 million. Let's not forget that.
Yeah, I don't feel sorry for him.
No. He's going to be well compensated. And I do think, quickly, to me, this will be Will Muschamp. This will be Jim McElwain. Now, I don't think Billy gets back in the SEC as a head coaching rank like Muschamp, but I do think Billy Napier will be a head coach again. Jim McElwain got another head coaching job. Billy's a young guy. He certainly was great at Louisiana. I do think Group of 5 or maybe even lesser Power 4, we have not seen the last of Billy Napier as a head coach. What's your quick thought there, Frank?
Yeah, I agree. I think his first stop won't be that. I think his first stop will be wide receiver coach at Georgia or running back coach at Tennessee. But yeah, I think he's going to get another crack. I do think it's Charlotte, Memphis, Tulane. Yep. I don't think it's necessarily Iowa, Wake Forest, or Virginia. But I think Billy gets another. There's a lot of good, and people are mad at Billy. There's a lot of good in Billy Napier. I think he'll get another crack. He's not an old guy, but I'd be a little surprised if it's a significant Power 4 job.
Hayes, final thoughts from you on what was certainly a big day in Gainesville today.
Yeah, I appreciate the chance to be with you gentlemen on this. I would say that I think it's a good day for Florida football. I think the future is bright with the pool that is there. I think Billy Napier does deserve the fans' respect for the roster that he leaves behind and the culture that he leaves behind. The new coach, I'll steal a line from Will Muschamp, don't let the next guy tell you there's no talent here. And that's the case. Now, they can leave, but they've at least got 5 days to listen to whoever the coach is. And I have to think if it is an established D1 coach that these kids know, again, with the money that Florida can pay them to stay, you have to think that they're able to retain a lot of that talent. And it could be a situation like a Ron Zook where you're looking down the road in 5 or 6 years and you point and say, look at the players that Billy Napier got to that campus. Coach X, who succeeded him, was able to do some great things with the core that he left behind. But I think ultimately Florida football took a big step today, and I think they're going to be really excited when they meet their new head coach.
I've got much more on this tomorrow. 16 hours of local programming on 1010XL and 92.5 FM beginning at 6 a.m. with Jeff Prosser, going all the way through Hacker After Dark with myself beginning at 8 o'clock tomorrow night. Obviously, we'll talk Jaguars. Mike Norvell, could he potentially be next in Tallahassee? And then, of course, the Billy Napier fallout, gone as the head coach of the University of Florida. Frank, Hayes, thank you guys so much. Have a terrific remainder of your weekend. Frank, have a great vacation, and we'll talk soon.
Thanks, Hack. Thanks for doing this, buddy. You guys take care.